Welcome everyone to another episode of the Campus Waterfowl podcast. I'm your host, Derek Christians. We got another podcast here from our collegiate waterfowl research tour is kind of what we've come to call it. But this weekend or this week, I've got the pleasure of following along Casey Setash around Colorado here. And Casey and I, we got introduced to one another through Mike Brazier, who's actually the waterfowl biologist at Ducks Unlimited. Casey's name got brought up in conversation with Mike because of her experience and what she's doing out here in Colorado, and along with I think was it in 2019, she won the DU fellowship. But Mike highly encouraged us to come out here and kind of feature what they're doing out here. But without further ado, let's kind of jump into the podcast. Let's start with Charlie here right away.
I'm Charlee Manguso. I'm the crew lead for Casey and Adam's project. I was a tech on this project last year, and just here to kind of help the project out, I guess.
Run the show day to day.
Yeah.
I'm Casey Setash. I'm a PhD student at Colorado State University. I kind of finagled my way onto this project because Colorado Parks and Wildlife was starting up a long-term monitoring project, and I used that to secure a PhD for myself. And I've started out as crew leader on the project in 2018, and then started my PhD in 2019. So I've been working up here for the last 4 summers. This is the first summer I haven't been living in Walden, and letting a crew leader take over this year so I can actually finish the degree. But yeah, I'm just studying ducks in Walden for now.
All right, my name is Adam Behney, and I'm an avian researcher with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So I do research to help our managers make decisions on how to allocate money to different types of habitats and locations and stuff like that. And most of my research is on game birds. I've done quail research, pheasant research, and a lot of duck research.
Awesome. And I think this podcast is we were kind of talking pre-podcast, but it's going to be a pretty exciting podcast because we kind of have all 3 levels here. We have the tech, we have the grads and the PhD student, and then also the full-time guy out in the field doing it full-time as a career. So we'll be able to talk about each kind of the lifespan of, kind of getting that full-time job, I think. So
Yeah.
Pretty fun. But can you guys talk about the area that we're sitting and explain to the viewers kind of, where we're at in Colorado?
Yeah, so we're in north central Colorado. We call it North Park. There's North Park, Middle Park, South Park, which is like the namesake of the show, and then the San Luis Valley. And those are all these really high elevation intermountain basins. So they're surrounded by mountains, and I think at one point, like millennia ago, they all used to be huge lakes, which is why along some of the edges of some of them, you find these big sand dunes. Once those lakes dried up, the sand just blew over to the mountains. One of those is Great Sand Dunes National Park. And these systems are mostly characterized by sagebrush, and rivers. It's the headwaters for the Rio Grande River, in the south of the state. Up here, it's the headwaters of the North Platte River. And because of those rivers, they've historically had lots of wetlands coming around them. So they've been pretty important for ducks. However, they've also had pretty rich agricultural histories. In the southern park, the San Luis Valley, they grow a lot of potatoes down there, and they do that with center pivot irrigation. And up here, it's a little bit of a difference just because they do flood irrigation. So people are drawing water off the rivers to flood big hay meadows, and that hay goes all over the country. It's fed to some of the best race horses in the country, and it's a super important agricultural crop of Colorado. These systems, let's see, some of them have had historically the highest breeding density of ducks in the country.
Wow.
But that is certainly changing as things get drier and warmer. So that specific spot was the San Luis Valley. And so we kind of want to know, as that area especially gets drier, the aquifer gets drawn down and the water gets used up, are the other areas like North Park up here going to become more important for breeding ducks? Anything to add?
Yeah. So we think that a lot of ducks are nesting up in this area. We've got some historical data to show that ducks do nest up here, but we don't really have a whole lot of data to show how many or where exactly they're going. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we started this project, is to look at where ducks are and how many ducks there are, and questions like that.
Yeah. It seems like, yeah, the area has a lot of opportunities yet to draw different scientific questions or have learning opportunities, it seems like.
Definitely. And we're just getting started with this kind of broad scale project, just to hopefully it'll spur more additional research in the future, more focused questions.
And we also know, just from data that comes from the 70s maybe, that a lot of the birds that get banded here, that like were bred here essentially, get shot in Colorado. So it's not the duck factory that the prairies are, but it's important regionally, just for like state level harvest and the regional population of ducks.
What about, I kind of just want to touch on it, but what is the migration of ducks kind of through Colorado? Because, yeah, like you kind of said, we're pretty much sitting in a bowl. And so where do kind of the ducks, what do they look for when they're going south, or where do they kind of go from here?
Well, so far it seems like they go everywhere.
Really?
A lot of them will jump over the mountains to the Front Range area of Colorado, to eastern Colorado. Some of them that will continue south through the mountain parks, as we call them, down into New Mexico through the mountains. But yeah, there's not really a definitive path they follow from here. They kind of go everywhere.
And we also see some, like during the fall, there's some northward migration that happens, some like molt migration. Some of them have been shot in Montana, I think, California, all over. They're just kind of, it just depends.
That's crazy. What about some of the research that you, Casey, are doing specifically here? Kind of explain to the viewers and listeners what they can expect in the YouTube video that will be coming out.
Yeah, so since hay is such an important agricultural crop up here, and those hay meadows are flooded via flood irrigation, they essentially create wetlands that we think might be useful for ducks. So people that work for Ducks Unlimited and for the state come in and they help the ranchers that have these or grow the hay improve their irrigation infrastructure. Like, they want water on the landscape for ducks, so it benefits them to help the ranchers put that water out there. But no one's ever actually really looked at like whether those hay meadows are beneficial, so that's kind of what we're testing. And it's turned into like, just how are these habitats that exist here beneficial for ducks? How can we make them more beneficial? And the different components of that. So some of those components are invertebrates. So we're looking at the different types of invertebrates that exist in the different wetland types, and there's ponds, there's big reservoirs that supply water to the town and for irrigation. There's irrigation ditches that draw the water off the rivers, and those are really interesting because they can't be cut like by tractors when they're harvesting the hay. So they actually do have leftover vegetation from the year before that then can provide nesting cover for ducks the subsequent year. And then we have the hay meadows themselves that get flooded early on, but then dried in the later part of the season to be able to harvest the hay. I think that's all the habitat types. So we're just looking at, does the abundance of invertebrates vary across those different habitat types? And not only abundance, but like, does the type of invertebrates that exist in those vary across habitat types? And the reason for that is because those are what ducks eat. Especially during the breeding season, they need this super high protein diet to produce eggs. The broods need lots of protein, so we want to know what's out there for them and whether they're kind of tracking that throughout the season. Are they changing their habitat preferences for different parts of the breeding season? And along with that, we're following their nesting habits. So we're trying to find as many nests as possible. And like I said, it's definitely not the duck factory. Like, they're finding hundreds and hundreds of nests on those projects, and we average like 40 a year. So they're nesting in super low density, and we just want to know, why do they select the sites that they do? And do some species, like, can they be drawn into a trap, essentially? Mm-hmm. Are these hay meadows, like, do they look appealing early in the season and then they end up being detrimental to their nest survival, or are they actually really helpful for them? And we also we want to put the whole thing together into like one broad picture. So we're looking at counts of ducks early in the spring and then counts of their broods once the ducklings start hatching. And we can put that along with banding data into a big population model and look at just like how this region is doing. It's basically a case study of duck populations in the Intermountain West, which is what this region is. And how we can even project that a couple years and see like under different climate scenarios, how is that going to change? If there's less water available, what's that going to do for different like survival rates of ducks, and how can we kind of prepare for that essentially? Do you want to add CPW's component?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered everything. Yeah, I mean, well, from the state's perspective, yeah, we're trying to just kind of get a baseline of what's going on up here right now. Like Casey mentioned, with climate change and factors like that, it will be good to have some data to show what's happening here and document any changes on the landscape. Just try and get an idea of what's going on with ducks in North Park.
And what about, so when it comes to getting the data and having enough data, how much data really do you need to draw a conclusion at the end of the day for some of these studies?
Yeah, well, more is always better. I mean, with anything like that, more is better. I think this initial project that we're working on here, we did, 6 or 7 years, I think. So we're trying to capture some of those trends that may be occurring and capture that variability from year to year with that. But yeah, I mean, we're planning to keep collecting as much data as we can. I'm not sure if that'll be enough, but we're hoping that 6 or 7 years will be enough.
And yeah, I mean, the value of long-term data sets in the waterfowl field, especially, like there's a rich history of very long data sets in this field. So if we can even get like a piece of that, it would be great. And we've been lucky enough since we started this project to have like super variable weather every year. We've pretty much run the gamut from the 2019, we had 8 inches of snow on June 21st. So the welcoming in summer with some snow. And we're at like 8,400 feet here, I think, of elevation. And then compare that to 2020 when there was like a call on the river, which means that people can't pull water off to irrigate as soon as that season started, because there was no snow in the winter, which translates to no water in the summer. So we can look at that variability and see how it affects the ducks and how to prepare for that in the future.
Yeah, I will say it's been challenging finding enough nests to really do any kind of detailed analysis. Just like Casey mentioned, the nest density is so low. We have to cover so much ground to find any nests that it's just, at the end of the season, we don't end up with a whole lot of nests.
Charlie's smiling. When you say distance, how much ground are you guys covering in a day usually to find these nests?
Before we found our first nest, I covered 156 miles. So, and then today we did like 8, like it's between like 6 and 10 every day.
And those are wetland miles, which are like twice walking
waders and muck boots and it's like high knees every time.
Yeah, this is not ATV nest dragging like they do up in the prairies. It's too wet in these areas so we can't use ATVs, so it's a lot of walking.
And we're also searching in riparian areas a lot, like along the rivers, and those are just chock full of willows. So the birds will nest in the base of the willows and along like the thick vegetation around them. So that's literally just walking with sticks and like hitting everything you can. It's just doing anything you can to flush the birds.
And when you guys are going out, and are you guys using ropes between 2 people and pulling ropes, just walking?
Yep.
It's pretty heavy.
Heavy rope.
Yes, you'll see tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's intense.
Yeah.
Sweet. I'm excited. So, today we just got here today and got to my first experience in the area, and I gotta say the mosquitoes here. I think I don't know if it's the just time of year or what, but they top Louisiana and the Minnesota mosquitoes. They're something else. Like
If I'm not here last week, I think you got here like the hatch was like early this week. So.
It was something.
Yeah, you should get a close up.
I know my arm is just all bitten up, but I'll never forget it. Now I got to experience Colorado. So, and we're in the moose viewing what is it? What is
Moose
the
viewing capital of Colorado.
Colorado? So
I think I'm up to 62 moose sightings from just April.
since April, what?
Yeah, there's
Sweet.
a lot on here.
Hopefully we can find one before I have to head out.
We could
I bet
probably
you will.
look like right out there and
Really?
see one. But yeah, they're definitely the most dangerous thing we deal with out here. They're like calving right now, which is also when we're nest searching along the rivers, which is where they hang out. And they're large animals when you get up close and personal. We've had a couple scary close encounters.
Because they're just so big and they kind of just hide in the willows, and you come around a willow and they're right there.
Oh,
And you don't know if it's got a baby, you don't know if it's a bull, and it's just, a lot going on.
We carry bear spray just in case.
yeah, I was just gonna ask, like, have you taken anything with you? What about kind of going off of that? Some of the species in the area that even like big game species, and then also like waterfowl specific. What are you guys seeing for waterfowl around the area?
Go ahead.
There you go.
Right. We've got a ton. I mean, it's pretty much everything that you would expect for the West. We've got gadwall are probably the number one species we see, which is tricky because they are tough to catch. Let's see, mallards, cinnamon teal are probably the second most abundant. We don't see a ton of blue wings. We do see a few on migration, but not a ton actually breeding here. Green wings, widgeon, lesser scaup, canvasbacks, redheads. What else?
Like, I don't know, coots and
Yeah.
ear
The
greaves,
coots.
but
Yeah, some cool western grebes that do the like dancing. Yeah, and then they call it like a sportsman's paradise. Like it's moose, pronghorn, mule deer, elk, lots of elk.
Really?
Especially the elk come down on a lot of these ranches and just eat the hay stubble all winter long, and then they're up in the mountains the rest of the summer. So pretty much everything you could ask for.
Yeah.
Badgers.
Yeah.
One of the first species I saw driving in was a cinnamon teal in one of the ditches, and I was pretty excited. First cinnamon teal I got to see. So
They are the best.
I never would have guessed that they are as abundant as they are in this
Yeah.
area. Do you think that's because of the high elevation, or what is the reason, or are, I guess, cinnamon teal kind of known for being in this area?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're on the kind of the eastern edge of the cinnamon teal range, and they've been kind of working their way east.
Mhm.
The whole range of cinnamon teal have been kind of moving east. So yeah.
Yeah, and the San Luis Valley is like one of the highest breeding densities of cinnamon teal, I think, in the U.S. So it's not a surprise. I would expect them to be here for sure.
Yeah. What about kind of touching on the day-to-day, and we can probably, Charlie, you can talk about the day-to-day stuff being, I always throw around the term, and from my first trip with Brett, the term tech life, and so what it's like being a tech out in the field. Would you mind sharing kind of your story and even, how you came about this position?
Yeah, so I graduated from CSU in 2019, and I did a sage-grouse job for a summer and chronic wasting disease technician for a couple winters, and then hopped on this job last summer as just a tech, and then got the crew lead position for this summer. So our normal day-to-day, we start at 6 because there's less bugs and it's less wind. This area gets super, super windy in the afternoon. And so this time of year, when we first started, we were doing our pair count. So we'd go out, I think we have like 125 different counting locations somewhere around there. And we just are counting, just going through the riparian and just counting like who's there. Just so we go like pair of gadwall, pair of mallards, and just counting like that for each location. We do that for like the first half of the day. And then we nest search. And that's, like Casey said, you just go out with a stick and just search around. It doesn't sound very sciencey, but we found them in willows, in the grass, in the reeds, in the bulrush. Like there's no wrong place you can look. We found them everywhere. And then occasionally we'll do some meadow counts where we just kind of walk out 50 feet apart, like 200 yards, and count everything between us. 200 meters. Yeah, meters.
Science
Sorry,
meters.
meters. And do some of those, and then the rope dragging that we'll do tomorrow. And that's kind of what it looks like. And then it changes from pair counts to brood counts, and then banding at the end of the season.
Okay. And when you say the season, how long is a season? How long are you out here for?
So I started like mid-April, and I'll go till mid-September.
Okay. And then back to classes then, or
so I'm done.
You're
yeah.
done.
So
Okay.
hopefully another winter job. We'll see.
Yeah.
Seasonal life is rough.
Living the tech life.
Yeah.
Casey, what about your kind of upbringing? Kind of what got you into the role that you're in here today?
It's been a long road. So I went to Virginia Tech for undergrad, and I went there because I thought I wanted to do pre-vet. Like if you like animals and you don't grow up hunting or fishing or on a farm or something, people tell you like the only option is vet school kind of. So I went there thinking I would do pre-vet, and then found the Wildlife Society, which was just a club on campus, and immediately changed my major. I realized people could be wildlife biologists. And every summer I did a tech job. I spent the first summer up in Alaska working with spectacled eiders, which is, I kind of attribute to getting all my duck work in the future at grad school and everything. I went to Mongolia and worked with falcons over there. I banded raptors in New Jersey, went to Montana. And then once I graduated, I knew I wanted to go to grad school like as quickly as possible. And I kind of applied to my master's position, which was studying cinnamon teal out here at CSU on a whim, not thinking I had a chance, and got a call from my potential advisor and moved out here like a couple weeks later. So I was very lucky, but I also did a lot of tech work to get there. And I had 3 field seasons for my master's, which is longer than a lot of people. Like most people do 2 for wildlife. And pretty much started my PhD right after that. So I've been in grad school I've been living in the field now for 10 consecutive summers. This is my first summer not actually living up here or living anywhere in the field, which in some ways is kind of sad, but is also really nice to not be in a trailer with no running water, or getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. But yeah, I'll probably be finishing next year and then hopefully finding a permanent job.
And what about Adam? We got you a little bit longer story now.
Yeah,
You're
definitely.
full-time.
Casey's was long. Really long.
Let's talk about tech and tech and where you're at now, but now full story.
Yeah, so I was always interested in science growing up. I knew I wanted to do something related to science, environmental science or something like that. And I started hunting when I was a teenager, and that really got me interested in the wildlife. And I was fascinated about how wildlife was managed and how we look at populations and all the different aspects that go into wildlife management. And so I grew up in Pennsylvania, and Penn State has a good wildlife science program. So I went there for my undergrad, and then worked a couple technician jobs on songbirds and spotted owls and a couple other things, and then got into a master's program at Texas Tech, where I studied lesser prairie chickens and interactions between raptors and lesser prairie chickens. See how efficient raptors were at taking prairie chickens when they were on the legs. And then finished up there and worked another couple wildlife jobs, and then started a PhD at Southern Illinois University, and that was my kind of entry into the duck world. So I had started duck hunting while I was at Texas Tech, and that really got me interested in ducks and wetlands and all that kind of stuff. So I got a PhD studying ducks in Illinois. I was looking at foraging behavior of ducks. And yeah, ever since then, I've really just been into waterfowl, and graduated from Southern Illinois University and got this job here in Colorado, and I've been here for 7 years now. And had projects, I think I mentioned before, looking at quail, pheasants, and ducks.
And coming back to Charlie and Casey, Adam mentioned that duck hunting was kind of the first thing that got you interested, or hunting in general kind of got you interested in wildlife. What got you guys interested in the research side of things?
It's kind of the same. We grew up, my dad was a big hunter, so I've been hunting for a very long time, and we camped and were outside. We were very fortunate to grow up in away from big cities. And just being outside every day is kind of what drew me to this field.
Mine's kind of the opposite. I like to call my childhood like an Animal Planet childhood. Grew up in suburban Pennsylvania. There was like one state park near me that I begged to go to regularly and didn't get a chance to like go outside and go camping until college. And once I started doing that, I got really excited about all the potential outdoor experiences I could have. And what really got me excited about research specifically was taking a class in undergrad that was focused on population dynamics. I really like to learn how populations work and what are their drivers. And ducks are like the perfect system to study that. There's so much long-term data. People care about them a lot of money goes into managing them, and so we have like these incredible banding data sets that we can use to study all sorts of stuff. And they're just I kind of went from the science to the ducks, if that makes sense.
And what about gaining experience in the field? Like, if you guys kind of been all over the place, it sounds like. How do you even go about finding positions like that, and how are those even promoted on like the job boards or through word of mouth? How do you even come about them?
Well, most people advertise on the Texas A&M Wildlife and Fisheries job board, it seems like. So that's a good place to find jobs, and there's a ton of jobs on there, so if people are looking for them, that's definitely where to start.
But I would also just say, like, I was averaging like 20 to 30 applications a year, and I would maybe hear back from like 2 or 3 of those. I think it's more competitive now. Like, I hear people applying to like 40 jobs and maybe getting an interview. That's mostly just for like technician positions. And now Twitter is actually a big place that people advertise jobs. There's like most academics are on Twitter now, and that's how people share papers and like postdoc or PhD positions. I don't love it, but it's like definitely a good way to network and like network easily with people you might not talk to otherwise. But like getting positions for grad students who's like maybe worked in a lab that I might have been interested in was like how I went about thinking of what to apply for since I knew I wanted to go to grad school.
And I would say word of mouth has really helped me. I started out as an intern in a Parks and Wildlife office in Hot Sulphur, and they've kind of been really helpful in like putting me in a position to be a tech in somewhere else. So I would say really making a good impression with people that you were working with the first time, because I'm back 2 years with these guys, and I worked a couple seasons where I started. So just being someone that other people will want to work with, I think, is helpful.
And I think one of the most important things is building your network. Right from the beginning. I mean, when you're an undergrad, you have to volunteer with grad students, meet your professors, and you just have to build that network, and then opportunities will just kind of present themselves.
Yeah, getting that foot in the door is like the most important hurdle to get over. Paid positions are so much more common than they were even just a few years ago, and hopefully no one has to actually volunteer their time, but just like helping out a day here and there with a grad student can really like pay huge dividends for if you want to go that route.
And you think Twitter is that more than good a resource than any? Like, if someone does have a question, say for you, Casey, or even any researcher out there, you think that they would be more than happy to help that student, or at least answer some questions that they might have?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, it's a cool way to get access to papers. Like, if somebody doesn't have access to a publication that's behind a paywall or something, you can just ask the author if they're on Twitter, or you just say like, I'm an undergrad looking for a position. These are my interests and what I'm good at. And like that can get passed around like pretty easily. And there's always people looking for technicians. And sometimes it just happens that like they pick the easiest person rather than like advertising widely. So if they know you're looking, and like they're more likely to just pick your name because it's easy and close, essentially.
And what about Charlie? We kind of touched on it earlier about kind of what it's like now trying to apply for tech jobs. Can you explain kind of, is it very competitive right now? And maybe do you have any recommendations to students out there that are of the same age or maybe that are even in high school and listening to this and trying to already start their resume?
It's stressful. There's a lot of options. And like Casey said, just applying to a lot all at once. And then kind of picking which ones, like when you get calls back and sorting through which sounds the best. I personally do it a little different. I just apply to one and just really, really hope. And so far it's worked. So, I mean, that's really bad advice. I feel like you need to do more.
Manifesting.
Yeah, it works because here I am. But I also say, like, on your resume, like, I feel like I always try to get experience on there, even if it's just like one day. Like, at least I can say I was exposed to it, and hopefully that looks nice to someone else who says, oh, well, she's been in, like, she's helped call it a deer or has aerial telemetry experience. Like, I was there and I did it and I put it on the resume, so I hope that counts for something.
I'd say also, from looking through a lot of these resumes, seeing people put like volunteer experience on their resume, it looks so much better than people who just, put like one job and their degree and that's it. I mean, it shows that they're interested and that they're willing to go out and get those experiences. So I definitely would agree that it's good to get the experience and then put it on the resume.
Yeah. And I think going along with that, like, it shows enthusiasm more than anything. And I think that's the same for every field, but it matters so much more that you want to be there and that you're enthusiastic than whether you have experience. I mean, most of the stuff we're doing is not rocket science. Like, you have to be able to identify plants maybe and like identify ducks, but other than that, you can be trained on everything like pretty easily. So if you show us that like you really want to work with wetlands or ducks and like you're gonna go the extra mile and work an extra hour if you need to, like that matters so much more when we're hiring people.
Would you say the statement, is it the nature is the greatest teacher or whatever? Is that the statement where like you can teach those things out in the field so much quicker than out in the classroom?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
I came into this job last year not really knowing a single duck besides like a mallard. Like, I know we hunted them and so I can see them, but the first time we looked through the scope, I was like, I have no clue what any of these birds are. And within like the next like week and a half, I feel like it like clicked and it was like I knew what I was doing at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, those skills are so easy to teach. I mean, identifying ducks, how to drive a four-wheel drive truck and stuff like that is so easy to teach somebody. The most important thing is that they're enthusiastic and that they want to be there.
What about before? I want to touch on a little hunting, what it's like hunting in this area. We talked about that in the truck while we were doing some work. What's been your most favorite part, kind of throughout your entire career of where you're at? What's your favorite part of this whole experience?
Related to hunting?
No, like even up until this point, just being involved with research and what you're doing.
I have to think about that one.
Or something that surprised you that maybe you didn't think would come about, but before you got into this research.
I have so many. I didn't think I would get interested in hunting. I didn't hunt growing up, and I was a vegetarian for like 6 or 7 years, and it wasn't until I started studying ducks and meeting duck hunters and just like learning the importance to conservation and to local food. Like, I'm really into cooking, and so I got into it that way kind of, and have since gotten into like other big game hunting, and I really enjoy it quite a lot now. And just like the things you get to see out here that no one ever gets to see. Like, we'll be walking around and come across a harrier nest or a long-eared owl nest or a moose calf even, and like people just don't get to have those experiences. So it feels very lucky to get to see some of the stuff we do.
Yeah. I guess one for me would be seeing the results of research being used by managers. So, we go out and we do a study on a habitat treatment that a certain manager is using for, say, quail. And we'll go out and do research on that and see, if that management strategy is working out as well as it could, or if we could tweak it somehow. And then it's so rewarding to see that manager actually read the paper that you wrote and work with that manager on incorporating those changes if they're necessary. So that's definitely one of the coolest things that I've experienced.
And just seeing the results of your research, period. Like it's quite a task to get a paper published. And I mean, I haven't had very many so far, but like just seeing that you you went out there, collected all the data, and then analyzed it and wrote up the results, and you can see like a physical object a tangible result of your research it's pretty cool. It's pretty nice.
Mine's a little bit simpler. Just being outside every day and like kind of piggybacking off of Casey, just all the cool stuff that we see. I always carry my camera on me, and so just to capture what's going on out there, I think is awesome. And it's just way better than an office job to me. Just being outside, it's kind of how we were raised also, and so to be able to get paid to do that is awesome to me.
For sure. Let's get into the hunting a little bit. So what is the hunting like out here in the high? Do you guys hunt this area specifically, the high elevation areas? So what? I feel like it sounds like looking at Casey, it's like a secret she doesn't want to tell.
I feel like everybody has a lot of opinions.
What's one of your favorite things to hunt out here?
Ducks.
Go with the ducks.
Yeah.
Do you guys do any of the big game stuff?
Yeah, I think I prefer big game hunting. I feel like really guilty admitting that out loud, but I've been very lucky with my first hunts throughout Colorado. I got my first mule deer in 45 minutes and just walking around. I got my first turkey this year in one evening pretty much. So yeah, those have been really fun. I enjoy deer hunting a lot. And actually a couple of years ago when we were living in trailers up here for field work, we had a bear come into camp. And I never thought that I'd want to go bear hunting until that bear came into camp and terrified me. So I've got my first bear tag this year, and I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, you go.
Yeah, the duck hunting in particular is so dependent on the weather that year. Because we're at such high elevations, it can, by mid-October, everything is really cold and froze over a lot of times, so all the ducks are gone. So some seasons you don't really get a long duck season up here in the mountains, but that little window where the water is open and the ducks are still around can be pretty good.
And if you time it right, down in the San Luis Valley, it was one of the first duck hunts I went on, and you said it was one of the better duck hunts you've ever been on. I mean, especially for teal, they have an early teal season down there, just in that part of the state, and there are a lot of teal. So it's there's a lot of other hunters on the refuges because it's public land, but it's raining ducks, so it's pretty cool.
My dad took me hunting when I was 6 weeks old, so it's kind of I was going to do it or my dad was going to disown me, I guess. But I kind of agree with Casey. I like the big game better. The ducks, I just am not good at it. So I mean that's part of it. But my favorite part is just you're out there, you're on the river in the morning, the sun rises, you get to watch it, all this wildlife's coming through. And it's nice to be able to say that you fed your family, and it's a big family thing for us. We do it's not really party hunting, but my uncle, my dad, all my siblings, my cousins, it's kind of a big thing, and it's always fun. It's big memory making thing for us, and so there's always fun hunting stories, and we process all the meat ourselves, and while it's a lot of work, I think it's definitely worth it and a good lifestyle to be able to provide for yourself.
For sure. And what about, so the duck hunting up here, what are you guys hunting typically? Are you guys hunting the narrow streams, or is that something that you guys hunt up here, or what do you hunt?
Yeah, both. We've set up on a wetland just like you would do anywhere else, or we've jump shot the rivers, so just walking the riparian areas, trying to jump shoot ducks. Yeah, a little bit of everything. And there's not a whole lot of people up here, so at least after the first weekend of the season, there's not a whole lot of pressure on the ducks. That's pretty nice, yeah.
Which can actually make it kind of tricky, because like if you're on one of the larger reservoirs, which is where most of the ducks are, you kind of need other hunting parties to push them around a little. But there's gonna be snow and sleet, and our dog got his first gadwall retrieve, his first duck retrieve up here in the sleet. It was like the most miserable, freezing cold hunt.
And the one thing I didn't even mention yet was that we kind of, where we're sitting right now, and if you're listening or you can't really see it, but if you're watching, we're in a little, what is it? Just
The bunkhouse.
The little bunkhouse.
Yeah.
Sitting in the bunkhouse on a refuge. You guys want to talk about the refuge that we're sitting on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a Arapaho National Wildlife Refuge, and it was established specifically for migrating and breeding ducks. It's right along the Illinois River, and there are a ton of moose and a ton of just flooded meadows that they don't harvest for hay. So that leaves a lot of like vegetation the next year for duck nesting cover, and it's like this little oasis among North Park that just it creates a lot of ducks essentially. They also graze it with cattle, and they manage it pretty carefully just for ducks. Anything else?
Yeah, a lot of wetlands on the refuge here that you don't necessarily see in other parts of the park. Yeah.
You know how big the refuge is?
I don't.
That's a good question.
It's big.
Yes.
Yeah, it covers.
It's like a third of the whole park, kind
Really?
of.
Yeah, and their ability to move water around here is amazing. There's a pretty crazy ditch system where they can fill one wetland and then move it to another wetland, and it's just unbelievable
That's
the amount
crazy.
of water movement that happens.
On the ranches too. I mean, that's all they spend their time doing is just moving water around pretty much and making sure it's the right depth for the hay to grow and drying it out when they need to harvest and dealing with cattle as well. It's a full-time, it's a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. When they're with the ranchers, when they do when they're pushing water and stuff, so do they have they push water all to one field, or what you call it, field here? Okay, yeah, push it to one field, and then the other fields, would it be dry then, or is there enough water to kind of balance both? But then are they harvesting when there's water still, or where does that water then, where they store it when they do harvest, or how does that all work?
So they flood everything at once that they can. In Colorado, everything comes down to water rights, and they're super, super complicated here. It's like a system where it's called first in time, first in right. So like the people who go back the furthest in history that own that water right, they're the ones that get precedent. So like if they use up all the water at like the person after them who's more junior to them essentially, so they don't get water. And so yeah, typically they flood as much as they can. Some years there's not enough to go around, so they'll like graze a field instead of flooding it to grow hay. But it's got to be dry to get the tractor out there. So yeah, they just stop the water and then they have to let it dry out. They don't like divert it somewhere else, which is really helpful because a lot of times it's close to the river. So then that like recharges the groundwater. It goes back into the river system. Flood irrigation is known to like be a little bit less efficient than the sprinklers and use a little bit more water, but that water not only creates wetlands, but it goes back into the ground and like gets reused elsewhere, kind of.
You were gonna say something, man?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. What about we talked about kind of your experiences and like some of the tech jobs that you guys all took, but what about taking that next step where you are formulating your own questions and your own research? Kind of what's the process? What's that like? And then what is the process? And so of even figuring out what you want to research.
Well, for me, it mainly comes down to talking to the people who are on the ground in that area, what they're seeing over time, your own observations, what's previously been done, what's out there in the literature, and kind of putting all those things together into formulating, your research question that you're going to look at.
I think I'm still at the point where a lot of people are just telling me what to research in some ways. But I think, yeah, coming up with those novel, interesting questions is the hardest part. I mean, especially with ducks where they've been so studied that, like, to come up with something novel is kind of a challenge. It's a long process to, get out, like, see what the system actually looks like and, figure out what the greatest needs are, I guess.
Yeah, the best research questions definitely come from spending time out in the system where you're working and figuring out what are the questions out there.
Yeah, I like how Casey said it was, what's the greatest need? Like, what do you want to figure out the most that could help benefit this area?
Yeah.
And a lot of times that comes down to money. Like, how can we be spending money in the best way to manage the land or, move water around or anything?
And how, like, is it you funding all this?
Yes. Just pocket change.
What's the process of getting funding too?
It was really interesting up here because it was very collaborative. We knew CPW was starting this monitoring project, and they have these, they call them roundtables, people who are like stakeholders in the region who focus on water because it's such an important resource here. They create these plans for how water is managed in this like watershed. So we went to them along with Ducks Unlimited, and so it was like DU, CSU, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And we basically said, like, we want to help the ranchers irrigate better, and we want to study the effects of that. And so they funded most of it, and then that like funneled through Ducks Unlimited to CSU. It's like a bunch of different sources. I was lucky enough to also get the DU, one of the DU fellowships, which has helped with a lot of like little miscellaneous field costs that you don't foresee when you're proposing research. So those little pools of money can be like super helpful, and it's kind of just been cobbled together. CPW funds a lot of it, so we appreciate all of it.
Is it kind of you kind of take you formulate a proposal and then you're kind of pitching it to organizations? Is that kind of how it is, and then you're pitching it to multiple organizations in hopes to get funding? Is that?
Not always, like, not for you, typically, right?
Right, we get a lot of internal funding within Parks and Wildlife.
Okay.
For my research specifically.
But like in academia, you're writing grants or you're pitching to funding. I mean, this one was kind of unusual. It's not a typical funding agency, but we wouldn't like pitch to multiple people at the same time, but in order.
Gotcha.
Casey's project was pretty unique that she actually was really involved in getting the funding for her project. I know all of my graduate degrees, the funding was already there, so I didn't have to worry about that at all. But Casey had to do everything. Which
was really nice in a lot of ways because I could help formulate the questions and also just get that experience. I mean, it's if I were to go into academia or have to write grants, it's like a really great experience to learn how to write that, how to pitch it, essentially.
Charlie, does this scare you at all? Like all the funding and just all the things that Casey and Adam have had to do, or are you kind of excited for it?
I haven't decided yet if I want to even go to grad school.
Okay.
I kind of right now I'm really enjoying the seasonal life, but it is something that I think about. And I don't not even know where to start, but hearing some of the things, it is intimidating.
And then let's finish up the podcast with any advice that you might have to someone out there that's in the research field, or even they might be listening to this podcast right now and they might be thinking, I might have to look into becoming a waterfowl researcher or scientist. So any advice you guys might have?
You want to start?
Just say yes. Like every opportunity that comes up, it's probably going to be a good time. I can't tell you a single time I've like done something in this field and be like, wow, that was a waste of my time. And like we talked about, just getting that experience, get those skill sets and enthusiasm. Just really love what you do, I think.
I guess my advice would be that your references follow you everywhere. It's a super tiny field. I mean, wildlife in general is small, but like the duck subset of that is everybody knows everybody. So if you're like a really great tech one year, that could get you into grad school, and like your boss probably knows like a bunch of other people that work with ducks. So, making sure that you do the things that you should do to be a good tech, like waking up on time and like especially if you're a lot of times living in like shared spaces, just like being clean and being considerate of other people, just the normal things to be a good whatever roommate or what have you. Those go a long way in just like letting other people know that you're good to work with and that moving you forward in the field.
Yeah, I guess my suggestion would just be, like I said earlier, to build your network, as big as you can get it, so you've got the most connections. If you're wondering about, thinking about getting into the wildlife research field in general, don't hesitate to reach out to somebody who's doing research and just say, can I come along for a day even and just see what you do? Nobody's going to turn you down on that. It's really neat to see young people come in and be interested enough to want to go out and see what it is that we do every day. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out.
The youths.
The what?
The youths, the young people.
That's a new one. Well, I think we're gonna wrap this podcast up. If you guys are willing to share, what is a good way for anyone watching or listening to reach out to you if they have any other follow-up questions or would be or want to kind of get in the field, some in-field experience?
My Instagram is just charlee.manguso.
Perfect.
Yeah, mine's Conservation Casey. I'm on there a lot, more than I should be.
And is that Instagram, Casey?
Yeah,
Okay.
Instagram.
Probably, I've got a website on the Colorado Parks and Wildlife website. If you just search my name and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, it'll come up, and my email address is on there too, so feel free to shoot me an email.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys sitting down with me and talking about it and letting me hear your stories and the viewers and listeners of this podcast. Yeah, there's a ton of information shared in the short hour that we were talking, and I hope the viewers were able to take a few nuggets from it, and maybe they'll have to listen to it a second time because it was a really well put together podcast, I think. So, but I think we're all getting pretty hungry. There's a hockey game tonight that we got to get to. Avalanche are up 2-1 on the Lightning, so we are in Colorado. So, but yeah, thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of the podcast. Make sure to follow along this season. We have some more research trips planned for throughout this entire year, but then coming up in August and September, we'll be kicking off the 4th season of the Collegiate Waterfowl Tour. So look forward to sharing the next podcast with you guys.